the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA, and fortunately for us, a fairly frequent guest on Deadline DC. Welcome to the show, Sarah. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks so much for having me, and your column was a must read, by the way.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I certainly like what you put into Politicus USA, and I encourage our listeners to check out Politicus USA, which is, I think, www.politicasusa.com.
Correct. Yep,
Okay,
correct.
okay, great. Okay, let's start with this. You know, do you, the GOP for decades now, certainly going back to Richard Nixon, has postures itself as the law and order party. And, Americans pretty much accept that. If you look at the exit polls from at least the last two elections, the midterms in 2022 and the presidential election in 2020, the GOP had a big advantage over Democrats as being the party of law and order. My hope, and this may be a hope more than anything else, is that the general lawlessness of the Republican Party and the violence it espouses is hopefully turn Americans against the Republican Party and undermine its brand as a party for law and order. Is this just a wishful thinking on my part, or do you think it could happen?
We could talk about this for 45 minutes. I just wrote about this morning in my on my Substack, and you and I've gotten into this before, and it's interesting that you started off with Nixon, because I was thinking a lot about how all this, the Republicans being branded as law and order party when as they were smearing anti-war protesters. It's an interesting history, because I don't think that the left was doing things on par with what the right is doing in terms of domestic terrorism and the impact on everyday Americans that we see from the Republican Party. And I want to note that here we have the leader of the Republican Party. He will be booked, fingerprinted, have his mugshot taken tomorrow, April 4th. He is the first president to face criminal charges, former or, current. And what does that say? He is still leading in the polls. He actually increased his lead in the primary for the Republican Party. What does this say? You and I both know what it says, actually. The base has been primed to accept lawlessness on the part of Republicans, because it's all about grabbing power. They don't care what Republicans do to get power. They want them to punish their political opponents and punish people with whom they disagree. And that's what it's come down to, which is, to me, and I want to, Viktor Orban gave his support for Donald Trump this morning. And I think that it is long past time for the media to catch up with what's going on in the Republican Party, because this isn't just about committing crimes like George Santos. It's about a party that is doing that on purpose to seize and keep power.
Okay, let me ask you this. You mentioned something that I think is interesting. You're right. Polls of Republican primary voters have showed that Donald Trump's support has increased in the last couple of weeks in his quest for the GOP presidential nomination. What has surprised me is that not only support from rank and file Republican voters increased, but his primary opponents have jumped up very prominently to excuse Donald Trump's behavior. Now, you would think that if I was Mike Pence, thank God I'm not, or Ron DeSantis, they would be jumping up and down criticizing Trump's transgressions, but instead of that, they're actually rallying to his defense. What does that say?
They know where their base is, and they don't want to take on that base. It's the only support the party has at this point. They've really come down to their hardened supporters. And so, and I also think it speaks to lack of integrity and lack of courage. And those two things should kick them out of the running to be a president or even a presidential nominee. But as we saw in 2016, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I guess not.
So, and I think there's two things going on with which also dovetails in with the gun violence and the school shootings. And I do apologize when you were playing that clip and your rant about it. I got emotional. I have a really hard time with where this country is at right now on gun control and what's happening to children in their schools. I just find it really difficult to grasp that this is what we have become. It's abhorrent, but of course it's gerrymandering and also misinformation. I live in a Trump area. I know I tell you that all the time, but it's because I hear things every day. I have heard Democrats and Black Lives Matter blamed for why we don't have gun control numerous times. So people don't even know what they're voting for a lot of times, the Republicans specifically, it seems.
Yeah, it's I felt the same way. I had a real tough time writing this column because it says something. The fact that I don't know how many hundreds of the kids have been or thousands have been killed, as it's the leading cause of death among children now.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think with such carnage, it would demand uh, Congress to act on gun violence, but there's no chance of that. The scary thing is, even if Congress, a miracle occurred, and both the House of Representatives and the Senate voted to take actions against gun violence, it would be shot down in a minute by the Supreme Court. And
Right.
what's going on in this nation that we can't even take care of our kids? It is very depressing.
Oh, it's horrible. It's absolutely, it's tragic. And then, this weekend when Asa Hutchinson announced and everybody was like, oh, a decent Republican. And I'm like, he was the face of the NRA. He
Yep.
came out in 2012, right, to defend the NRA after the Sandy Hook shooting. He was their face in 1999. He's been on their side.
Sarah, I'm going to
This
have to
shooting.
interrupt you. I lost
Sorry.
track of time again. We'll be back with more Deadline DC and our guests, Sarah Jones, Editor-in-Chief of Politicus USA.
There are
Sarah Jones, Editor-in-Chief of Politicus USA. Today in Nashville, high school students in Nashville walked out of classes to protest the lack of action on gun violence, and we certainly applaud their efforts. And let me ask you this. I don't have a good answer for this, Sarah, and so I shouldn't ask you the question. What do you think it will take for the nation to act to control gun violence? Is it going to be, somebody walks into a high school somewhere with all sorts of guns and kills couple hundred kids? Is that what it's going to take? Is there any hope at all?
I don't think there is a threshold for the number of deaths because I think once Republicans got away, it's majority Republican. There are some Democrats, of course, who are NRA pushers, but once they got away with that in 2012 after Sandy Hook, it's been a free-for-all. They don't face any repercussions. So what can we do? We have to look at Michigan as one example. They got rid of their gerrymandered maps. All of a sudden they got Democrats in office. Democrats pushed through some gun control. Now, as you pointed out earlier, that could be overturned. The Supreme Court can come in and try to limit that like they have in other states. So at every level, we're facing this power grab on, and I cannot wrap my head around a party that calls itself the pro-life party and pro-family, and they support this. There is no amount of slaughter There is no amount of dead children that are going to turn their minds away from the NRA. There just isn't. And I think with the same energy they brought to turning abortion into something that is by the states and that is basically very difficult to get, the rest of the country has to get on board and take that energy and use it, because they need to bring that energy to this issue or it's not going to change. It's just not. And I also think we need to add seats to the Supreme Court, because they are destroying this country.
I've been involved. I've been thinking about this ever since I saw the killing of those 6 people at the school in Nashville. And I've been in politics my entire life, going back to when I was a kid. And I just wonder, there's no solution in sight for the federal government to act in gun violence. A couple of weeks ago, the UN released a report on the impending climate disasters. There seems to be, and then there's immigration, which, no one is capable of dealing with. And, sometimes I just feel that, I wonder why has the political process completely failed this nation? Okay, welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. If you want to contact Sarah, her Twitter handle is Politicus Sarah. That's POLITIC US Sarah, SARAH, all one word. She is the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Their website is www.politicasusa.com. Sarah, do you ever get completely frustrated with the political system and its inability to deal with the important problems facing the nation?
I do, and it's funny that the context that you were talking about in the break, because I feel a lot of that, and then I'm asking myself, let's go back in history. I try to put things in context to say things were really difficult. I mean, look at look at the civil rights movement and all of the challenges that they faced, and I try to remind myself to, not get lost in that sort of feeling that there's nothing that can be done. But do I get frustrated? I do, and honestly, since the 2015 lead up to the 2016 election, I have not felt the same about this country and the possibilities of it to uphold freedom. So yes, I do feel frustrated. I have a lot of questions and concerns about where this country's headed. And I think ultimately it will right itself. But how many people are going to be hurt in the interim? And what is it going to take? Because do people need to go into the streets? Do we need to see protests like we see in France and other countries right now? I mean, what is it going to take? I'm absolutely disgusted by the state of politics. I'm disgusted with the way the media covers this, because a lot of it is like, oh, it's a culture war, it's politics. No, it's not. It's people's lives. And there's nothing political about children being slaughtered at school. That is not a political issue. It should not be one. We should all care about that and want to stop it immediately.
Yeah, this is my favorite example, which I'm sure I've talked about before. But every night I watch. I make time to watch the one of the network news shows. It's always pretty much the same broadcast every night. It usually leads off with the latest weather disaster. There are, it's been snowing like crazy in Southern California. There are tornadoes that have, been sweeping the mid-South for the last few weeks. And, you said you have complaints about the way that the media handles these stories. Well, they never talk about when they come to the weather disasters about the fact that most scientists and meteorologists believe that this absurd weather we're having in most parts of the country is a function of climate change. But they have these endless stories about weather disasters, but they never put them into context. And that's what bothers me about the media format of the national media reporting. And you can say the same thing about gun violence or immigration. They don't really put in context. I guess they worry about offending specific groups of viewers. I don't know, but it doesn't help things. Uh, let's turn to another issue that's been in the news lately. We talked about Donald Trump. I'd also like to bring up Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Lately, there seems to be stories coming out of Florida pretty much every day about the latest GOP war on woke. They're banning statues, they're banning books. And it seems to me that Ron DeSantis, every time I see him, he's attacking woke Democrats. And it seems to me that, Ron DeSantis really wants to take us back in time to the 19th century where we didn't talk about unpleasant things. And my question to you is that a winning presidential strategy? Do you think Americans really want to go back to the days where we banned books? It seems to, help them a lot with Republicans. But is that a winning presidential strategy?
I want to say no, but I'm not going to, because I hear about woke all the time here in Trumpville from people. Now, maybe they're all Republicans, but I feel like that kind of stuff is a contagion. We saw it with the Hillary email thing. It's just one thing you drop in there and then you repeat it nonstop, and then everybody starts to think there's a problem with woke. And I would like to point out that the word woke, which none of them can define, even when they're in court, except to say, oh, caring about social justice and facts, basically, came from Black culture. And so it's doubly insulting that they have they're co-opting this word that is meant to, be aware of injustice and physical violence against Black people. So do I think that DeSantis can win doing the woke culture wars? I think that a politician could definitely win. He obviously lost the war against Mickey Mouse so far, but I do think he suffers from a lack of charisma. I don't think he's the right one to carry that message. I know the elite in the Republican Party want him, but I hear a lot of complaints from Trump supporters and Republicans here and other places that I've gone to poll people, and they don't like Ron DeSantis. He doesn't speak to them as the kind of, authentic person that they think Trump is. So I don't know that he's the one to carry that message, but unfortunately it seems to be very popular with their base. I wrote in the other day that they have these trigger words that all they have to do is say this word and the base starts like kind of frothing at the mouth. I mean, it's very weird, right? Why would you care about people being aware of history? I don't know, but it really bothers them. And so as soon as they hear woke, they're just charging. And it has trickled down into regular culture. It isn't, a lot of times I think, oh, this is just happening on Twitter. And certainly since Elon took over, it's been like a Nazi show every day. But no, I'm hearing this from people that, shouldn't be discussing politics at all. And it does concern me.
Yeah, well, this is my theory about Republicans. Well, first of all, I should say to our listeners and viewers that I have a hard time in general understanding Republicans. I don't understand what they do and how they do it. Although I must say, uh, I'm not sure I've been working for Democrats for several decades now, and I'm not sure I understand then much what the Republicans are doing is completely foreign to me. But this is my theory about Republicans, and see if you agree with it or not. Joe Biden, if you look at the national polls, the average job rating for the president is about, I think the latest I saw was 38% positive. And I think that the Republicans believe they can do or say anything they want to, regardless how ridiculous, because Joe Biden is toast. And all they have to do is win the nomination and they'll get to the White House. Do you think that's what motivates the Republican Party?
I think the Republican Party has for decades, gotten away with saying and doing whatever they wanted to. And in large part, they were able to drive national media coverage, mainstream media coverage with their talking points and with their claims. And it's really, I really want to hear your thoughts on this too, because it's really when we started to see just recently with the Fox News lawsuit that their propaganda machine is disintegrating. It's not filtering down into mainstream media. And then there were other Republican and conservative led outlets that have long been able to, like the Acorn video, they've been able to drop these quote investigations that turn out to be deceptive and misleading, but that would drop in and the media would eat it up, and then it would take up all the headlines, and that would be that. Acorn is no longer, even though they didn't deserve what happened to them. So I think that there may be something shifting, but Republicans,
Well,
but maybe
certainly
not.
think you're right, Sarah. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we're running out of time. I want to thank today's guest, Paul Lisnick, legal and political analyst for